Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I never expected my peaceful life on the farm to be disrupted by the arrival of unwelcome who parked their 3 trailers there. These individuals were what some would call white trash, indulging in excessive drinking, shouting, cursing, and neglecting any sense of decency. I, however, held no grudges against them simply because I was a farmer, and understood that others might look down on me as well. But their behavior crossed all boundaries. As it turned out, these neighbors owned a waste removal company, which only served to make their actions more ironic. Instead of managing the waste properly, they left it strewn across the property, even encroaching on my own space. It was a repulsive sight, an ever-growing mountain of garbage that posed a serious health hazard. I couldn't stand idly by any longer. I had to take action and teach them a lesson they would never forget. One night I caught one of them trying to steal one of my chickens. Furious, I confronted him, causing him to flee back to his trailer. This incident served as a warning that I couldn't let my guard down, for who knew what else they were capable of. Their blatant disregard for cleanliness and basic courtesy only added fuel to the fire of my determination to seek justice. Listening to their boisterous conversations, I learned that they boasted about not declaring taxes for their waste management business. They reveled in the idea of saving money by evading their obligations. Armed with this knowledge, I made an anonymous call to the IRS, tipping them off about the unreported income. I savored the satisfaction of hearing their panicked voices echoing through the trailers, oblivious to my role in their misfortune. But it wasn't just their business practices that fueled my rage. It was the children living amidst this squalor. I rarely saw these youngsters attending school, their lives seemingly confined within the trailer's squalid walls. Neglected, dirty, and surrounded by intoxicated adults, they were the innocent victims of this dire situation. I couldn't bear to witness their suffering any longer, so I reported my concerns to Child Protective Services. Soon after, a black car pulled up, and a well-dressed lady began knocking on the trailer doors, engaging in conversations with the occupants. The conditions were so deplorable that the children were promptly taken into custody. It wasn't a vengeful act on my part, it was a desperate attempt to safeguard their well-being. Foster care might not be perfect, but it was a step away from the environment they had been subjected to. Witnessing the removal of the children, a surge of anger coursed through me, urging me to enact one final act of revenge. With the legal compost piles I maintained for my livestock, I decided to create a massive one right on the property line between our lands. The stench was unbearable, even for a farmer like me who was accustomed to such odors. The putrid smell permeated the air, rendering the neighbors unable to step outside their trailers. Weeks passed without a trace of their previous belligerence. The noxious compost pile had finally driven them away, forcing them to abandon their trailers and seek refuge elsewhere. I took solace in the thought that they might have learned their lesson and changed their ways. Perhaps they found a better place to live, reformed their behavior, and reclaimed their children from the foster care system. Unfortunately, my knowledge of their fate was limited as they vanished from my life. What I do know is that their waste removal company ceased to exist. My research yielded no results, suggesting that they either went bankrupt or re-emerged under a different name, continuing their deceitful practices. Regardless, I relished the newfound peace and tranquility on my farm, surrounded only by my faithful chickens and cows. I was content, knowing that I had defended my land and brought justice to a chaotic situation. If anyone should acquire that troublesome piece of land in the future, I welcomed them. But let it be known that I had no qualms about standing up for myself and taking revenge once more should trouble arise. The farm and its inhabitants were my priority, and I would defend them at all costs. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I, 22M, work in construction and run a few crews. I'm a foreman because I've been working in this field since I started working summers when I was 14. That's legal in my state. With that being said, I have a lot of experience and get paid really well. For my job, I need a truck that can pull trailers and navigate sketchy job sites, especially in the winter. So I drive a new lifted pickup, F350. Anyway, let's get into it. About 4 months ago, I finished work and didn't feel like making dinner, so I decided to go to McDonald's and treat myself to a trusty Big Mac. After picking up my order, I was about to pull out into the parking lot to drive home. I was looking hard to my left to see how busy the road was before getting over there. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying close attention to what was happening in front of me, and as I was creeping forward, I barely hit the mirror of the car in front of me and scraped its door with my front end. I immediately reversed and got out of my truck. I made sure the guy, let's call him Brent, was okay and apologized. Knowing it was my fault, I asked him if he wanted to call the cops. Brent said, "Nah bro, we're all good. If you just give me your insurance info, I think we can take care of this." I was fine with that since there was no damage to my truck, and it's not required to call the cops for an accident in a private parking lot. This becomes relevant later. We exchanged info and he seemed pretty cool. I told him to get a damage bid and I would pay in cash so my insurance rates wouldn't go up, as long as he was okay with it. He agreed and we both left. I felt like a moron, but all in all, Brent seemed like a cool dude, and I hoped we could resolve this smoothly. About a month passed and I hadn't heard anything from Brent or the shop I recommended. Honestly, I wasn't too stressed because if he decided not to get it fixed, that was on him. Then one day around noon, Brent called me. He couldn't remember my name and wanted to let the guys at the shop know who sent him there because it seemed like we knew each other. I told him my name, and the guys at the shop gave him a deal. Pretty sure they say this to everyone, LOL. He sent me the bid for damages, and it came out to $2,403. That was more than I imagined, but I agreed to get it fixed, and assured him I would take care of the bill afterward. He said it was cool, and I went on with my day as usual. Another month went by without any updates. Then Brent called me again while I was at work. He said, "Hey brother, I talked to the shop and they can't fit me in for another 2 weeks or so. They might end up charging me more if they find additional damage." I replied, "Okay, sounds good. Just let me know, man. I hope everything goes smoothly for you, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience." He seemed to take it well, and I genuinely wanted to be a good person in this situation. He responded, "Well, after talking to my wife, I'm okay if you just want to write a check for $2,500 and we can call it even." This seemed odd to me because why wouldn't someone want their vehicle repairs fully paid for? I said, "Okay, man, let's set a time and place to meet, and I'll get you paid." He liked the idea, and we ended the call with him promising to let me know. Yet another month passed without any communication. At this point, I was getting fed up and just wanted this situation to stop hanging over my head. Brent contacted me at 11 p.m. one night asking if we could meet in town. I found this kind of disrespectful because I was almost asleep and had to be at work at 5 a.m. the next day. Nonetheless, I agreed, took $2,500 in cash, and quickly drafted a contract stating that this payment would be accepted as payment in full for the damages. By accepting it, he would release me from any and all liability. I believed it was a fair contract since it reflected the deal we had already made over the phone, just in writing. We met at the suggested spot. I gave him the cash and he signed the contract without even reading it properly. He didn't want a copy either, which raised a red flag, but I assumed he didn't care much about it. I sent him a photo of the contract and went back home to get some sleep. As you can guess by now, another month went by, and I continued living my life carefree, not worrying about this stupid car accident. One day, I checked my mail and found a notice from Brent's lawyer stating that he was suing me for not paying after wrecking his car. I was furious, but I also knew I had plenty of text messages and a contract on my side. I immediately tried calling Brent, but he blocked my number. Luckily, my girlfriend works for a lawyer, so I informed him about the situation, and he offered to help. He let me know that I had saved myself by writing that contract because any contract worth over $500 is legally enforceable in any court in my state. I got to work on seeking justice. I remembered that Brent's car had a business logo on the side, and I had taken pictures of the damage. So, I went online and looked up the owner of the company on the Better Business Bureau, BBB website, thinking that surely Brent couldn't be the owner due to his behavior. To my surprise, he did own the company, and I discovered about 12 one-star reviews, all disputing his shady business practices of quoting one price, but charging customers 4 times more. Sound familiar? Remember when Brent mentioned the possibility of the shop charging more than the original $2,403? That's right. He was suing me for $10,000, 4 times what the shop had quoted him. Unbelievable. He was trying his same sneaky tricks on me. My lawyer took note of this, and we prepared for court. This guy was sleazy. As we arrived and set up in court, he had the audacity to say, "Are you ready to give me more of Daddy's money?" With a smirk, I guess because I'm young, drive a nice truck, and could afford $2,500, LOL. His lawyer stood up and began spewing nonsense, from accusing me of hitting and running to claiming Brent barely managed to get a picture of my license plate. They tried to paint a picture of me trying to bully Brent into accepting a deal for only $2,500, even though the damage clearly exceeded that amount. However, there were obvious holes in their story, and they didn't have much to say. Imagine the smile on my face as my lawyer presented printouts of our text messages and the physical copy of the contract, which Brent had signed. His lawyer looked pale and sickly. After presenting all the evidence, my lawyer revealed a hidden gem. Printouts of all the complaints we found on the BBEB, exposing Brent's repeated deceptive practices. That was the final blow, as the judge stated he had seen enough. He asked Brent for any final statements, and Brent replied, "I don't even have the $2,500 anymore. Can I just pay that and we'll be okay?" He literally admitted to the judge that he had received my money and that his story was a complete fabrication. I thought his lawyer was going to strangle him. It was a beautiful sight. The judge ruled in my favor, demanding Brent to pay not only my legal fees but also damages and lost wages since I had to miss work to attend court. The sweetest part was that on that particular day, my crew was working on a job with a very high wage. Technically, I was the one getting paid first, and as subcontractors, they were to be paid afterward. This meant I was entitled to $475 per hour, and since the entire ordeal took about 5 hours, Brent ended up having to pay me almost $5,000. I don't think I've ever been happier in my life. I know this was quite a lengthy story, but I felt the need to share. Thank you to anyone who made it this far. The next one is a petty revenge story. My husband and I bought a franchise. At the time, I was working at another job while my husband was taking over the business, and no one in the network had met me yet. On the day before the takeover, my husband, the previous owner, and the company's area manager were doing a final check and stock take in the store during business hours. I was meeting them in the store after work to go over the final details and meet everyone, as I would eventually be heavily involved in the business, payroll, accounting, and HR side of things. I should add something important. Taking over the business meant that we could choose to keep the current staff or hire new people without any legal repercussions. As soon as I walked up to the store for the first time, all the current staff had been informed by the previous owner that their jobs were safe. We didn't want to fire everyone who knew the job and replace them with unskilled people. That's just silly. All they had to do was meet us and make a good impression. I walked up to the front counter, it's a retail food business, and smiled and greeted the sales team member, Karen. I later found out Karen had been working in this particular store for about 6 years, and had been with the brand for approximately 9 years. Instead of a greeting, I was met with a glare and a sour look. Now, Karen didn't know who I was, and for all she knew, I was a regular customer coming to buy products. I was immediately annoyed at this, but still with a smile on my face, I introduced myself. Nothing. She continued to glare, didn't introduce herself, or even attempt to crack a smile. She still didn't say hello. I was now extremely annoyed at how rude Karen was. Having worked in customer service for years myself and having taught it as a profession, and being, a decent human being, I was shocked that someone with her demeanor still even had a job. I then quite abruptly told her to let me in because I was one of the new owners, and was expected to be at the meeting in the store. With a huff, she opened the door and let me through. She still couldn't even crack a smile or be remotely polite to me, which pissed me off even more because she was expecting to be kept on with us. After a few minutes of talking to my husband, the area manager, and the previous owner, I told them that we wouldn't accept that level of service in this store, and that we definitely wouldn't be keeping her on. My husband agreed 100%, and it was decided. On my way out, as the store was closing, I said goodbye to Karen and casually dropped, "It was lovely to meet you today, Karen. However, we won't be keeping you on at this store, so please ensure you take all of your belongings when you leave. Have a great night." Karen was visibly shocked, and the joy of watching her face drop as she realized she no longer had a job was blissful. My husband stayed until after closing to make sure Karen didn't do or take anything she shouldn't have, and I skipped merrily back to my car. Enjoy unemployment, Karen. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I worked for a small company for the last 2 years as a software developer. And when I say small, I mean that I was the only employee, so for many projects my boss had, I wrote the main part of the code base. In March, I made a mistake in one of the updates, and from then on, my boss made it a habit to yell at me at least once every day and tell me how stupid I am. Additionally, he started to call me outside of my working hours to demand fixes for problems that, for the most part, were his own mistakes. To be fair, my code quality started to go downhill after I had several mental breakdowns thanks to his behavior. At the start of May, he said to me that he didn't want to fire me but would recommend that I find another job in the next month. So, I applied to several companies and was waiting for the responses when he decided to terminate me nonetheless 2 weeks later. He wrote a termination letter and sent it to my home address but didn't say a word to me. So, I was quite shocked when I received the letter which stated that I was fired starting July the 1st and that I should take my remaining 20 vacation days, which is the rest of my annual leave, in June. But in Germany, where I work, the employer is only obliged to give you the rest of your annual leave if you worked more than 6 months in the company this year. Additionally, an important project which I had been working on since February was due in mid-June and not even close to being finished because my boss had prioritized tickets from other projects. So I wrote to my boss that I would like to take the vacation days immediately, as written in the termination. But if he needed help finishing the current project, I would be willing to have the remaining vacation days paid out to me. As soon as I sent the message, I saw in the chat program that he was typing. He answered that the number of vacation days in the letter of termination was a minor spelling mistake, and that I only had 6 days left. After a quick chat with an attorney, a friend of my parents, who started laughing when I told him of my boss's reaction, I wrote my boss a formal email in which I informed him that I would definitely take the vacation days as stated in the letter. And because the termination also stated that the remaining vacation time would not be paid out, I would withdraw the offer to help with the project. The next week, he grudgingly accepted the 20 vacation days, and I will never forget the expression of defeat on his face on the last day when he realized that the project he took a loan for was about to fail phenomenally, because I was the only one working on it, and he didn't even try to understand how it works. His slogan was always, "As long as it works, I don't care." The next one is an entitled people story. On a day when I was off work, I was craving a sandwich for lunch on a hot day. I traveled to the nearest subway and got in line. As it was noon, there were quite a few people in line, and like many places, they seemed understaffed. I understand that everyone is doing what they can in that situation. There was a young teenage girl who was the only one making sandwiches, while a manager was ringing up orders when not helping with condiments. So, while waiting in line at Subway with about 6 others, I was behind a group of 3 old ladies, the Karens of this story. Although they didn't look exactly like typical Karens, you could tell from how they talked to each other that they were the kind of women with resting bitch faces. When it came time to have their sandwiches made, each one of them wanted a very custom sandwich, with specific meat, cheese, and requests like toasting or changing the bread. On and on they made these annoying demands, and the girl making the sandwiches was getting frustrated and stressed. Then the manager stepped over to help, but these women were not happy with anything. After 15 minutes of making each of these ladies' sandwiches, it finally came time to pay. They went to the register while my meatball sub was quickly made and passed down. I ordered mine with plain bread, meat, sauce, and a little ranch, so I waited behind them. The manager rang up the old ladies, and when the total came out to around $30, they complained again. They started squealing, saying they had waited forever to be served and that their sandwiches weren't made properly. They wanted their food for free. I was fed up with it, and after it continued for a few minutes, I stepped up and said I would take the sandwiches and add them to mine. The old ladies grinned, thinking they had won. I paid for the 4 sandwiches and added my drink and chips. After my card was approved and I was handed my receipt, I picked up the 4 sandwiches and grabbed my drink. As I started heading towards the door to leave with my food in hand, one of the old ladies called out, Excuse me, you still have our food. Aren't you going to bring it to us?" She held up the receipt. I replied, "Nope, I paid for my food, and I'm taking them back to work." I continued towards the door. This got the old ladies to get up and chase me out the door, which I didn't mind. The staff had had enough of them, and I could handle some abuse from crazies. "You need to give us our food, or we will call the cops and have you arrested," one of them shouted. I knew this was ridiculous, but as I said, there was nothing better to do on my day off. "Please be my guest," I replied. "I assure you they won't be doing anything about this." One of them started to pull out a phone and call, while the others began telling me how I must love stealing from old ladies, and how they knew people who would ensure I'd be in jail for a long time. Well, they called. I stood there, not saying a word, which was hard to do while being belittled, but I had the store crowd watching by this point. Soon enough, a few police units pulled in, and as the officers got out, a look of confusion crossed their faces. "Officer, Are you the guy they called about? Do you match the description? Me. Yeah, I'm the one they called on. Look into it. Ask the clerk and manager who paid for the sandwiches and check out this receipt. One officer walked into the store, spoke with the staff, and watched the video while the other officer listened to these women insinuate that I had taken their food. The shock on their faces was priceless once the other officer came out and confirmed that I had paid for the sandwiches, and the store also wanted the 3 women trespassed for causing a disturbance. I was released to leave, but decided to go back in and eat. The 3 women were banned and left with an even more sour look, and the manager brought over a cookie, telling me it was on her. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.